All right, so the human constant, what they didn't teach you while deriving equations. And you can see I've got my ideal gas law up there, and I've tragically removed the gas constant in favor of my stick figure here, which represents all of us, of course. So back in 2014, I attended the NWA annual meeting out in Salt Lake City. I was pretty young in my career. And I had just come out of a talk that was, I believe it was a warning coordination meteorologist at the time, talking about decision support services and developing relationships with our partners, our core partners that we have in the Weather Service. And, coming out of that talk, we were going right into a coffee break. And as you do, you kind of go through the line to get your coffee and snacks. And I noticed there was a guy standing next to me and looked over at his tag, and he had all these, he worked for NOAA, but he had all these acronyms that I didn't really know what they were yet. And, but it all sounded very scientific. And he started a conversation with me in line, and he goes, this decision support stuff, human factors, he goes, that stuff is only here because people who don't know how to do science need something to talk about. And I was like, that guy just doesn't really get it. And unfortunately, that wasn't the last time I heard that in my career. And I would argue to everybody who says that, if these things are so easy, then why are we so bad at it? And that's what I'd like to talk about today, are some of the things that I've brought with me throughout my career that have worked for me, that all relate to human interaction, that are critically important to your success, whether it's in this field or any field. And they also apply to your personal life, right? Because we deal with people all the time. But who am I to tell you this? Well, we define ourselves in many different ways, right? And here I'm using airport codes in the first line to show you all the places I've lived in my life. So I grew up in upstate New York, and then I went to Miami for undergrad, out to Honolulu for my grad school. I kind of got introduced to the Weather Service there a little bit more. And then I got my first job in the Weather Service in Raleigh, North Carolina, where I was not only a Met intern, but a general forecaster for a decade. And we were co-located there with NC State University. So I got a lot of interaction with students there too. And then finally, I got my job here in Morehead City, North Carolina, over on the coast as a science and operations officer. But in my current position here as AMS board chair for the Board for Operational Government Meteorologists, this talk came about because the incoming chair, Dr. Stefan Bida, I'm very excited to see what he's going to do with the board going forward. He talked to me and he said, look, he goes, as your last duty to the board, why don't you just give a webinar and talk about whatever you want? And I said, wow, nobody's ever given me a platform like that before. That's a lot of pressure. What am I going to talk about? And then I thought about it for a while, and I really did have a lot of stuff I wanted to talk about, but I'd never organized it in a way for a talk like this. So in some form, you're a bit of a guinea pig audience here, because this is the first time I'm giving this talk. So I really do want any and all feedback of what you thought, what resonated with you, what you think I got wrong, and then I can fine tune this and improve this down the line. But regardless of where I've been and what I've done, the underlying factor here is that, just like you, I'm a human being, and we all have these commonalities that connect us all. And if we look for those and exploit those, we can really have some success. So quick disclaimer. Now, I'm a science and operations officer. I love physical science. The title might make you think otherwise. And, that's kind of a hook. So if you're here today, the title either resonated with you or maybe it pissed you off. And you're here to tell me otherwise. But either way, it got you in the door. And I think this message is good for everybody. Now, I find that, of course, the physical science is important. And we do a great job of teaching that along the way, whether you're in academia or as you get into the Weather Service, we have a high level of concentration on the physical science. But what I've found is the keys to success in your career and life far more often hinge on these human dynamics that are hard to navigate, both internally within yourself and externally with others. And so, what I wanted to do here today was a kind of a Cliff Notes version of topics and tools that work for me. Now, all of these topics, none of them are new, but we still tend to struggle with them. And so, what I hope to do here is go through a little bit of each. Now, each of these topics, there have been dissertations written on, textbooks on, so we're not even going to scratch the surface. But I hope that it sparks you to look for those things in yourself that maybe you want to improve upon, and then go outside of this talk and dive deeper into those things. So let's start at the beginning. And we are told from a very early age that you have to get good grades in high school to get into college, right? Our parents tell us this all the time. Then when you get there, you got to get good grades to get a great job. You have to be the best at work to get promoted. And so very early on, there's this emphasis on survival of the fittest, winning at all costs, no matter what. And so it kind of drills this into our head, this competition that we really have to be the top of the field. And then you go into your first class in college, and it looks like this room, and you're going, uh-oh, everybody here wants basically what I want. And every other classroom in the country is filled with students who basically want what I want. How am I supposed to be the best all the time? And you get into your classes of a few more weeks and you start to make friends. And you realize that while competition is good, collaboration is a lot better. And how many people here have sat with a group of friends in the library overnight or studied at a coffee shop like this one because you realize that you're going to have to bind together to get through this, and you really want to figure out what's on this midterm or on this final. And so by putting your heads together, you figure this out. And so you realize that the power of many is infinitely stronger than the power of one. You also realize that we are all interconnected on a much higher level than ever before. There's a popular leadership exercise, and I use coffee intentionally here because it takes you through, if you were to go to get a cup of coffee in the morning, try to map out how many people you're actually connected to, from the farmer who grew the beans, to the roaster, to the people who brought the product into the country, to the people who made the cup that you're drinking out of, the ones that worked in the coffee shop itself, and on and on and on. And before you know it, you're connected to hundreds of people just for getting a cup of coffee in the morning. And that's something we definitely need to be mindful of as we move forward. So why does this matter for us? How people interact with each other begin to define the culture of that organization. And you as an individual contribute to that organizational culture. So if you look at some of these pictures here, if you've ever been, remember when we used to be able to travel? If you went on Southwest Airlines, you know that their flight attendants are a bit different than every other airline. They are funny, they interact with people in a different way, and that's because the CEOs at the company have developed this culture that makes it safe for those employees to be the way they are, and that's the image that they want to put forward. Same is true in the military. I mean, this is kind of the ultimate, right? What binds people together that they will march into battle and potentially pay the ultimate sacrifice for each other? That doesn't happen overnight. Okay. Sports, we hear this all the time, but we don't call it culture, we call it chemistry, right? When you get to the level that these folks are at in professional sports, the level of talent is not that different. Everybody is good at what they do. But it is those teams that are able to bind together and create these bonds that seem to make it to the top. And so in order to be champions of a professional league, you have to have good chemistry, good culture. And that directly applies to us in the weather service or any other operational meteorology organization that you have, whether you work in the Air Force, whether you work for state emergency management, these are almost exclusively team environments. And if we don't come together, consequences can happen very quickly. And when I first came into the Weather Service, I did the all-nighter. I studied the fronts. I studied the equations that I derived. And then I got into the interview and I didn't get a single question on meteorology. And I was kind of scratching my head as a, mid-20s person saying, wow, I just spent, a lot of years in school doing this and they didn't ask me anything about it. But when I got into the Weather Service, I realized why. And that is because, things like how you work as a team, how you work under pressure, your communication skills, all of these things matter so much more than just the knowledge base that you bring in. Now, again, it's important to have that knowledge base, but these are ways that really propel you forward into making the most out of that. So we have to start, if we're gonna talk about, how to interact with other humans, we got to start with us first, okay? And so we have to ask ourselves the question, what do we want and why do we want that, okay? Now, all throughout this talk, I'm going to have little references to books like this one here, Simon Sinek's Start With Why, is a book that discusses this concept. So at the end, I'll have a reading list for folks to, if they want to go explore more, these are some of the books that I've found most helpful. But we need to know where we want to go if we're going to make a map for how to get there, right? And it's important to us to also understand where we've come from. Okay, remember the slide where I introduced myself? All of those things are my own unique frame of reference. None of you has that exact same path to get to where you are right now. Okay, and it's important to know that path because if we know where we've been, we can get a good idea for how to get to where we need to go. And we have to identify some of those biases we may have. Now, a lot of these may not be your fault in any way, but you may have, depending on where you grew up, kind of the ideas that you grew up with kind of mold you from a very early age. And it's important to know what those viewpoints are so that when we start interacting with other humans, we can actually figure out, where we might have a blind spot or a bias to do that. So we want to make goals and we want to make plans to get there, okay? We're very good at the big goal. And we do this all the time, right? As a kid, you want to be a meteorologist, big goal. Once you become a meteorologist, maybe you want to get a specific job, either in the Weather Service or maybe a specific position in the Weather Service. You want to be a warning coordination meteorologist, which for those not in the Weather Service, that deals with outreach to partners and making relationships with the customers that we have. And so those are all very big goals. But the problem with that is we get in and we realize that we get into the Weather Service and we can't achieve that goal tomorrow and we want it now. Okay, so how do we actually get there? Well, we got to break it down into smaller goals. And there's a book by David Allen called Getting Things Done. A lot of tech companies have used this system out in Silicon Valley. And he's got a concept, very simple, just called the next action. What is the next thing that I have to do to make me closer to that bigger goal? And set that as a smaller goal for yourself. So if it's to become a warning coordination meteorologist, you aren't going to get there tomorrow, but maybe the small goal now is do a Skywarn spotter talk tomorrow. And that little bit you can put in your bank account. And then over time, you put these little bits in and they grow just like compound interest to the point where before you know it, you're achieving that bigger goal. And so we got to make sure we break these things down. And we also, this is my personal opinion, and I struggle with this as well, but we romanticize that big goal. If I can just get this job, it's going to be better. Everything's going to be awesome, but I got to get there, and I'm not there yet. So I'm going to push myself even harder and harder. And before you know it, 10 years goes by, and you forgot that your original goal was just to be a meteorologist, and you've been doing that for 10 years, but you never really enjoyed it because you were so focused on that big goal, the next big goal, the next big goal. And I can tell you that when you get to that big goal, there's another big goal. And so the goalposts keep moving. And we have to be mindful of the fact that if we're going to be happier, more productive, and really getting the most out of our jobs, then we have to enjoy this ride that we're on each and every day. But quickly, we learn that we have a lot to do. Time is our most finite resource, and as you get more and more responsibilities, it starts to become overwhelming. And so we need to have systems to deal with this. I was a person early on that I could kind of handle everything. It was all in my head. I didn't forget too much. And then as responsibilities started to mount, I needed systems to help me organize that. And so going back to David Allen, he has another concept of time blocking. And so there are tasks that we have to do that are going to require a lot of thought and kind of solitary confinement, and they're going to require more time than simply answering emails. So if we look at our calendars and we have a block between the conference calls we have to take, and it's 3 or 4 hours, block that thing off so that you can actually focus on the things that are going to help you achieve your goals. Save the email for when you got a half an hour. If you start that 3-hour time block and you start typing an email, before you know it, you've wasted an hour with email that's always going to be there. So, try to just map out what you can. And then what you also want to do is put as much on autopilot as you can. David Allen says that, you got to get everything out of your head so that you actually have the space to think about the things you need to think about. And for me, Google Calendar did that pretty well. I wake up in the morning now, I look at Google Calendar and it tells me where I need to go. I'm not really thinking about it any more than that. And with the system we have where the weather service is on Google for everything, things pop into my calendar I didn't even know about, but I have to be there. So the next day, I know where I have to go. Email is another detractor. My goodness, we spend so much time with email, and we have to because we're kind of spread out all over the place, right? So you need to find that system so you're not going to miss something. I may be at the point now where I'm getting 100 emails a day, but only maybe 10 of them are things that I actually have to take an action on. So if I need to take that action and it's 2 minutes or less, I'll just do it now and get it out of the way. But if not, I'll put the star or the flag next to it, depending on what email program you use. And then when I come in the morning and I have that space for email, I can actually look at what needs my attention, get it done, and move on to the next thing. And so by having a system like that, I rarely miss anything. It's a rare occasion. I won't say I never miss anything, but it's pretty rare. And finally, you want to identify your time sinks, right? What are those things you're putting a lot of effort into and not getting a good return of investment on your time? And that can be things like scrolling through Facebook, consuming too much 24-hour news cycle. I'm a huge baseball fan. Okay, baseball games are 3 hours long, and they play 162 games a year. You do the math. That's a lot of time sunk into watching sports. So we have to be mindful of those things if we're going to be very productive. And then related to that, and this is something we're particularly bad at as service-based scientists because we want to please everybody, is the power of no. We simply don't have enough bandwidth to do everything that we need to do. And so we have to recognize that we want quality in what we do over quantity. And we need to save that time for the things that we want to achieve. Now, I had a pretty generic picture in here, and it just was like a stop sign or something like that. And then just a couple days ago, I saw this tweet from Ginger Z. She's one of the most respected meteorologists, probably in the world. And she tweeted out, "I'm reaching the overwhelm point. Amazing how I've been able to do this to myself, even being in my house the whole day. My goal every day is to learn to confidently say no. I'm the weakest in this area. Looking forward to growth in this department." And this is a very real thing. Now, saying no can be hard, but if you do it right, language matters. Now, if you got a lot going on, you're overwhelmed, somebody comes to you and they have this, hey, I want you to work on this project. No, I don't want to do that. I don't have time right now. That's a lot different than if somebody comes to you and you say, hey, I really like what you're doing there. Right now, I don't think I have the time that this truly deserves. Therefore, come back in 6 months and check in with me, but I really like where you're going with this. I didn't even say the word no, but I let that person know that I I want to do the best job I can for them, but right now I just don't have the ability. And I'm also letting them know that, hey, I do believe in your project and I think it's worthwhile. That's a huge difference. So we want to be productive, and we're talking about creating these systems. And one book in particular, and actually an electronic technician at Raleigh gave me this book, and I was blown away after reading it. He said it's so simple to read and it will change your life. And that's called Atomic Habits by James Clear. He also writes online, and he's done a couple TED Talks and things like that. And he talks about, building habits has nothing to do with willpower at all. It's just setting yourself up in different ways to actually do the actions that you need to do. And so the first thing is set up your environment for success. Okay, they did a study up at Massachusetts General Hospital in Boston with the cafeteria. And they said, okay, like Coca-Cola and Pepsi often do, they want prime space, they want prime real estate. So that soda was front and center right when people walked in. They didn't do anything else except they put the soda in the cooler in the back behind where you get your food and where you pay for it. And they put a basket of water up front. They monitored it for a month, and water sales went up 70%. Soda sales went down almost as much, just by moving it. So setting up your environment for success is big. We often hear too, habits take 14 to 21 days to make. And I don't know about you, but I don't have that kind of attention span. Life is always going to get in the way to, between 14 and 21 days before I can create that habit. So he says an easier way to look at this is don't miss 2 days in a row, whatever it is you're trying to do. If you work out for 4 days straight and you miss one, it's okay. You can get back on that horse pretty easy. But if you miss 2 days in a row, now you've started a negative habit, and it's much easier to miss day 3, 4, and 5 until you get enough what we call willpower up to actually start over. So don't miss 2 in a row, and use trigger actions for yourself. If you want to work out, just put on your gym shoes, because if you put the shoes on, you've already made that investment and you're probably going to follow through with the action. Okay. Whereas if you don't do that, you're just sitting on the couch. Well, it's easy to say, I'm just going to stay here and watch the next show or the next show. So use those smaller, easier to achieve trigger actions to kind of get yourself going. And remember that all these things are on a spectrum. I love this concept of thinking about your life on a spectrum. You are where you are at the given point. And today is as good as any day to start moving a little bit closer to your goals. So this isn't a pass-fail universe. You don't wake up in the morning and lose 20 pounds. But if today you can lose 0.2 pounds, you're closer to achieving that goal. And so, just kind of keep that in mind as you're going on. I like to use the weight loss one because that's something I'm trying as well. Don't say wait till after. I'll wait till after the holidays, and then January 1st, it's all going to be better. No, I've got a couple days before Christmas here. I can lose a couple pounds. I can eat the ham, whatever I'm going to have on Christmas. I know the next day is going to be awful, but then I'm going to have a couple more days that I can kind of get back on track. And so kind of break things down for yourself. Now, if you're going to be successful in your job, you have to have your physical and mental health. Okay, you can't take care of others and all your responsibilities if you're not taking care of yourself. So don't forget to unplug completely from work from time to time. And I mean completely. No phones, no nothing. How many times do I see this in meteorology, especially with a storm like we just had up the East Coast? You're at work all day, you're watching radar for 8 hours. You come home, what do? You watch more radar. That's a good way to get burnt out. You have to stop, you have to unplug, do something completely different. And so, in Simon Sinek's Leaders Eat Last book, he talks about these 4 kind of key hormones that we kind of try to keep in balance. There's dopamine, which is kind of rewards. This is a little bit dangerous because it's an addictive hormone. So the Facebook likes, this is where this comes from. You keep going back and checking because you want that hit of dopamine. Endorphins, this is what you release when you exercise. And so it's almost like a painkiller that keeps you moving on, okay? And allows you to do more things, which is great. But then we have these other 2 hormones, serotonin and oxytocin. And serotonin is what you get when you feel respect or pride in something that you've done. Oxytocin is the love, trust, and protection hormone that we get from having close relationships with others. And so if you look at the top of this graph versus the bottom, those first 2 on top are very easy to achieve on your own. But the second 2 on the bottom really require a lot of interaction with other people. Now, this is biology-based, physical science-based stuff to tell us, how we can keep our body kind of intact. And it's interesting once you kind of map it out in your head. You got to be real careful not to get too heavy on dopamine and endorphins, and you want to make sure that you're interacting with other people to get the balance of these other hormones. But we talk about it all the time, right? Work-life balance. We got to be perfectly balanced. Well, that's never truly going to happen. Sometimes you need to expend immense effort on work. Just putting this presentation together required me to work a lot more on this particular thing than I did on anything on the personal side of my life this week. But the same is true for your personal life. There are going to be times when you need to take care of a family member because they're sick, that you need to invest more in your personal relationship, or else, more dire consequences may come from it. And so the trick is, I believe, to try to not consistently sacrifice one for the other so that over time they balance out. But there's no way they're going to be specifically in balance all the time. Now, we're really good at working and, sacrificing a lot of our personal lives for that work. And so a couple of ways that I've found to get out of this is find hobbies and interests that have nothing to do with work. As a result of the pandemic, I learned that I like to paint, and actually, mixing colors and things like that really takes my mind completely out of everything I'm thinking about and makes me focus on that one thing. I like to read, and I'll tell everybody over and over and over again, the best way to truly go out there, and of course, we can't do this now in the pandemic, but travel, travel, travel. The more you can see how other people do things, and it's different than what we do, you can take some of those things back into your daily life. And so there's nothing more exhilarating to me than getting out of my comfort zone and, kind of walking down the street in a foreign country where I don't know the language, and just truly observing how people live. And some of those positive and negative things. There are things that I go and I say, well, that wouldn't work for me. But there are other things that I can definitely bring back from that. Now, there's a lot of self-sabotage that can go on with, as we get closer to our goals, they almost become harder to achieve because we can't get out of our own way. And a lot of this is set up by society, the way we are, and especially with social media. When you scroll through your feed, okay, everybody's giving you pretty much the best of what they are all the time, okay? But what you're not seeing is all those days in between that life is going on just like normal, just like you. There are days where people feel they're not getting anywhere. They're not going to post about those. They're only going to show the best moments. And then if you collect 500 friends on Facebook, good chance that every day somebody's going to be having a good moment that you're going to see. And then all of a sudden you start to think, why am I not having good moments every day? You know? So you got to kind of get yourself out of that a little bit. And there's this vulnerability and intimidation, you know, not believing in yourself that you can actually do the job. You get this kind of imposter syndrome. And I've experienced this in the role of the Sioux as well. You know, there's this thought process that I couldn't possibly be worthy enough to do this. Okay. The reality is, at the end of the day, when you go home from work or whatever, think about what you think about. Are you thinking about other people's failures and what they didn't get done that day? No, you're thinking about what you have to do, right? So the chances are that the other people aren't thinking about you as much as you think they are. Okay, that's in our own head. Okay, and so we have to be able to get over that so that we can actually put ourselves out there to be vulnerable, to do the things that we want to do. SpaceX is a great example of this. They show us that failure is not only an option, but it's a necessity. We saw this last week. This was the 8th version of their Mars spacecraft. Okay, it did amazing things. It went up to 40,000 feet. It turned around on its own. It came back down. It found the launch pad, and boom, blew up into 6 million pieces. And a lot of people might consider that a failure. But Elon Musk was the first to come out and say, we got so much great data from this, it's only a matter of time until we're going to get this right and we're going to move on. And before you know it, we're going to be on the surface of Mars. And that's an incredibly powerful stance, knowing that you are going to have to take some step backward to go forward, and being able to embrace that within yourself to move on. Author Seth Godin, he's also an entrepreneur. He says writer's block doesn't exist. It's simply a fear of bad writing. You know, I experience this a lot. I sit there and I wonder what I want to type. Well, the problem is, he says that, you know, he can write 100 pages a day. Maybe only 10 of them are going to be good. But if he doesn't write the other 90 bad pages, he's never going to see that. He's never going to see the 10 pages that are good, because he'll still have 0 on the page. So try to get past that. And related to failure, when we do fail, we just have to take ownership of this, okay? Admitting that you failed is just as important. It's impossible to know everything. Don't pretend that you do. If you can show people that when you don't know something, you're going to take the necessary steps to look it up or find somebody who does know it, then you're going to be able to be trusted in these situations that are more pressure-packed and more intense. So there's a book called Extreme Ownership, How Navy SEALs Lead and Win. This is by Jocko Willink and Leif Babin. Jocko is an extremely powerful speaker. He's done a number of TED Talks, and if you've seen it, this is somebody who basically yells at you for 15 minutes straight and talks about how when he led a team into the Iraq War, some things went bad, people lost their lives. But when he got back and they had the debrief, that he was able to gain the trust of his men and his superiors even more, because he took ownership of everything that went wrong. And so what that does is it diffuses the unhealthy conflict that kind of manifests itself when there is something wrong, and it helps manage the healthy conflict. You know, if we miss a forecast in the weather service, and I come in and start, you know, yelling at people for what happened, that's going to promote unhealthy conflict. But if I come in and say, yeah, you know, I really need to do a better job of preparing folks, there are things that we can work on, and don't worry about this, you know, we're going to get stronger because of it, that really helps build that trust. And so it's hard to see here because it's on a Swiss tennis player's arm, but this tattoo says, ever tried, ever failed, no matter, try again, fail better. That is on Stan Wawrinka's arm. And like I said, he's a Swiss tennis player. This is a quote from a Samuel Beckett novel. But he knows, especially in the pro tennis world, and having fellow Swiss tennis player Roger Federer basically win everything, he knows he's going to fail a lot. He just has to get better at doing it. And as a result, he's pushed himself higher in his career for it. Now let's talk about perfectionism. This is one I'm pretty passionate about. I call it the specter of perfectionism. The period, worst period, answer, period, to the common interview question, what is your biggest weakness? Is I am a perfectionist. Okay, in my opinion, there's no worse roadblock to progress than perfectionism. Perfect doesn't really exist. However, that pursuit of perfection is very real. And as a result of that pursuit of perfection, if you take it too far, deadlines will be missed. If perfection is the goal, it's never going to be good enough for you to actually submit it. So you're going to have a hard time submitting it. And if perfection is the goal, then meteorology is definitely not the field for you, because I can assure you in my lifetime that we are probably not going to have the perfect forecast or the perfect forecast process. So the key here is to strive for progress, not perfection. Now, mentors matter. Now, if you'll notice these next slides, we're going to get into how to interact with other humans in addition to, just taking care of ourselves. So get yourself a mentor. Mentors can be formal or informal. They can be situational. Maybe there's somebody that's really good at a task you want to get better at. You can, recruit them as a mentor for that specific thing. You don't have to listen to everything else that they may or may not be good at, but take that mentor in that situation and really exploit that skill that they have. Now, you want to pick somebody that's unbiased, maybe a little bit removed from your personal work environment, because you really want somebody that you have no consequences and a safe zone with to talk to. If you have a mentor that's really related to the work that you do every day in your own office, it can be harder because maybe that person is friends with the supervisor and you're not sure how they're going to react if you tell them something that is really bothering you. So the best relationships are those that you can actually kind of remove a little bit from work. And remember that, what works for a mentor may not work for you. Okay, I'm talking to you today about things that worked for me. Some of these will resonate with you, but others will not. You don't have to take everything I say, okay? But there is maybe one or two things that you're going to go, yeah, I could really work on that. And so you're going to handpick those tools that you gain from this mentor, and you put them in your toolbox. And one of my favorite people to listen to, he's got a great podcast, is Tim Ferriss. And he has a book out called Tribe of Mentors. And the concept behind it is he's made an entire career of exploiting successful people and how they got to where they got and putting that into short, concise things that people can take with them. And so this book, Tribe of Mentors, he asks 500 people the same, I think it's 8 questions. And each of them has a page in this book. And it's top athletes, top entrepreneurs, top authors, top financial people. And each of them gives their individual answer on what made them successful related to that question. And so you can just read through that book and pick out little things here and there from all of these people that have gotten to the top of their fields. And eventually you start seeing the patterns. And the patterns emerge, and there's a lot of human interaction patterns in there, no matter what the field is. And so take those with you. Personality type training is something I got introduced to when I did our regional leadership program here in the Weather Service. Now, I am going to launch a poll quickly. And if you've ever done personality type training, I'm curious to see how many people have been exposed to this that are on here. We'll launch the poll. Another 5 seconds or so. Okay, this is good. This is really good, because this is kind of how I thought it would be. A lot of us have had this training, and some of us have had others. There's another one called DISC assessment that I've done. But if you look at these results, there's people that heard of it but never done it, and there's others that have never heard of it. And so that's just a clear example of how everybody's path is different to get them to where they are today. I'm going to hide the results here. And so we don't have nearly enough time to go into exactly what this is, but basically you're grading yourself based on questions, and the results that come out put you in different areas along a spectrum, once again, between these different things. So E and I is extrovert, introvert. N and S is intuitor and sensor. T and F is thinker and feeler. And J and P is judging and perceiving. And so you basically find yourself somewhere along these paths on each of these 4 lines. But nobody is all the way to one side or the other in any of these categories. And so what's interesting about it is you learn a lot about yourself, but you can also start to understand why people that you don't mesh with are thinking the way they do and perceive things the way they do. And once you understand that, you can really start to interact with people on a more meaningful way to get things done. Because what works for you and how to present something communication-wise is not going to work for somebody else. But if you can change your approach to fit them a little bit better, you're going to be able to bring that person on board quite a bit easier. And so this is one of the most powerful things I've done in my career, for sure. So we start to realize as we go on that it's not just about us anymore. Not only do we need people to elevate our own success, but we need other people to elevate the success of the environment that we're in. And operational meteorology is almost always a team environment. You know, relationships matter. Now, the Weather Service in particular has done a great job with this, in my opinion, that we are really heavy on creating those relationships with our core partners, right? But those are external relationships. What about internally within the organization? Are we putting the same amount of effort into developing relationships with our fellow forecasters, our fellow Weather Service offices, the relationships that exist between offices and region and headquarters? Are we doing that internally as much as we are externally? And so, you know, we have to be mindful of that everything that applies to making a good relationship with an external partner also applies to us. And if we can start to collaborate better, we're going to amplify our productivity. And there's no limit to how far we can go with the quality of people that we have in the agency. But we are only as good as our weakest component. And so each of us individually has to make a conscious effort to embrace and work on these things. And if we elevate the team, we're also elevating ourselves. So how do we do that? How do we develop these relationships that we have? So use that personality type training, like I said, to find those differences. You know, the best way to do the personality type training is through a formal Myers-Briggs program. However, there are other ways to get involved in it, whether it's just reading the books that they were based on, or there's several online websites that introduce you to the topics just as well. But interacting with a group and doing it together with your own teammates is a really good way to do that. Know your audience. You got to know who you're talking to, right? If, you know, we, with a science background, with 8 years of schooling and all the derivations of equations, right? If we start talking to somebody who hasn't had 1 ounce of that schooling, we better be talking to them in a way that they can understand if they're going to be able to take what we're saying and turn it into an actionable item for them. Because at the end of the day, all we really want to do, right, is make people take an action based on a forecast or a scientific output that we're seeing. So you got to know who your audience is, and that implies internally as well. Are you talking to, whatever kind of personality type is in your office may be different from your own. So if you just go into that conversation with the intention of making them believe everything that you believe, you're probably going to fail. So you have to be able to mold how you communicate. And you want to lay a foundation of trust. And a lot of this comes back to trust, and trust that we have among each other and among the agency and people that we work with in the outside world as well. So how do you do this? Well, you really have to start small and build a foundation, right? You need one small little thing that you can bond with somebody over that can act as that first layer of bricks to something more. You're not going to sit down with somebody and they're immediately going to spill their innermost secrets to you. But, if you share a common interest, maybe go and do that activity together. And then that sets up a trust. Maybe you have a connection with somebody over where you grew up or a school that you went to. Bond with people over that and let that build into bigger and bigger things, so that when you are on that midnight shift together, that maybe you open up a little bit more about something that's bothering you and help to diffuse a conflict that might be forming in the office. Maybe, then when you're in that heat of the battle, a snowstorm like we just had, that you can trust that person going forward. So start small. People just want to be heard. They want people to know, kind of what they're thinking, and they want folks to listen to that. And so if you're mindful of that and you start every conversation by either listening to what somebody else has to say or soliciting input from that person, you're going to get them invested right away. Okay. So if you have an idea that you know what it is you want to do, but you go to another person and you say, instead of just preaching what that idea is, you say, what are your thoughts on X, Y, or Z? And then they're going to be more open. They're going to start to feel invested in this back and forth process. And then together you can move forward and make the best decision for everybody. So they want to be heard. They want to feel safe. If you're in a position of management or even just a team leader working on a project, don't try to fix everything. Don't try to micromanage. The biggest turnoff and the biggest detractor from trust is when people think that you don't believe in them and what they're doing. And so you have to be able to put that aside and let people do what they're good at, okay? Conflicts are going to come up. Failures are going to come up. You can manage all those on your own. But if you don't start with trust, you're never going to have a great working relationship. Ownership, we've already talked about. That's a big part of it. Embrace inclusiveness. Not everybody thinks like you. That's okay. You want the best thoughts from everybody to come together, and eventually you'll start to identify these common goals that you can exploit and really move forward. And also read the room. I like this. Somebody told me this a while back. Read the room when you go in. If you start with a communication style and you can see body language that people are turned off and they don't agree with what you're saying, back off. There's another way to approach it. Try again later. Don't just kind of bowl your way through pushing things until the point where unhealthy conflict forms. There are other ways to do things. Be careful of classification. Now, we just talked about personality type training, which is essentially a classification of people, but we have to remember that nobody is exactly in any of those categories. We're all on a spectrum between them. And so, man, society just loves to do this today, right? You are this, therefore you must think or work in this way. Political party, we do this. Religion, wealth class, race, sexuality, personality type, the education we have, the nationality we are, the ethnicity we are, the generation we are. All millennials are lazy, right? No, that's not how this works. Manager, labor relations, the job titles we have throws us into these bins. You're a science person or you're a communications person. God forbid if we're both, right? WFO region, WFO means Weather Forecast Office for people not in the Weather Service. Our regions that we work with, headquarters, forget about these classifications. Each one of us brings that unique path that we have to the table. We have to use our frame of reference and other people's frames of reference to make sure that we're treating everybody as individuals. All right. Is there anything worse than a mime? All right. I hate that I have to even put this in here, but watch out for abstract humans. Okay. What I mean by that is that technology has added all these layers of abstraction to how we communicate. And I guarantee you, probably 90% of the time, we're either chatting, emailing, or texting with somebody. These are the worst forms of communication you can possibly have. There's no body language. There's no tone of voice. There's nothing that gives us context clues about what the other person is thinking. And as a result, they just become a computer screen, and we type away, and we're much more likely to type things that we would never say to somebody in person. Just look at Facebook, right? So if you can, phone call is better than either of those things. Video call is even better, right? You can see me, you can hear the inflection of my voice, you get some body language, but in person is always best. There is nothing like connecting with somebody over a meal or, just walking from one place to another. So in person is the best kind of communication, because if we don't get that body language, which some studies say is like 80% of how we communicate, then everything is lost in translation. And if we're going to do that, then the mime doing this and whatever he's doing is actually communicating more effectively than you are 90% of the time. So don't forget that. So we want to network, okay? If we want to network with people, there's something that people do that drives me nuts. I call it napalming everybody, all right? They go online and they want to be a meteorologist, so they Facebook friend everybody in the industry, whether or not they have any common thread with that person at all. It's kind of weird. Don't do that. Twitter might be the only platform where that's okay, because following somebody is a little bit different than connecting with someone on Facebook, where a lot more of your kind of personal friends are there. So just be careful of that. I remember sitting in it was a job fair, and there was a class of students that needed internships, and they just needed that internship to graduate. And so they didn't care what the booth was that was set up, who the organization was. They just went table to table. Do you have an internship? No. Next. Do you have an internship? No. Next. That is not a good way to connect with people. Now, your network is only going to be as strong as your relationships with the people in it, right? So a better approach is make a commonality there, like we talked about, building trust. Maybe there's somebody that holds a job that you want to have in the future, and instead of just friending them on Facebook, maybe read something that they've done and message them about it. And then all of a sudden, now that person says, well, wait a minute, here's somebody that's actually read what I've worked on. I like that. As a result, I like this person. Sure, I'll talk about it. Come on in. And then you open the door for that relationship development. Different people have different strengths, of course. And so you want to build a network that's going to challenge you. I don't want a network of people that thinks exactly like I do. I want different groups of people that I can go to ask on subjects that I don't know a lot about. And so, you want to be the small fish in the big pond. You don't want to be the big fish in the small pond. If you're that small fish in the big pond, you're going to gain something from all those other big fish that are in the pond, and you're going to grow yourself. And then when we build our teams, if we get ideas that we want to have going forward, we build our teams from these networks. And a team of people with individual strengths usually performs better than a team full of well-rounded people, okay? For a time, there's like this emphasis on being well-rounded. That's good. It's good to be a jack of all trade, but when somebody is looking for a specific thing, a specific task, like say being good at GIS, and they know that you're the guy that's good at GIS, then they're going to go to you first, as opposed to a well-rounded person who might be kind of good at GIS and kind of good at something else. So we want to build our teams and exploit the strengths that we have. Know the playing field, okay? There's a book by Harvey Kuhlman. This was introduced in our leadership program called Empowering Yourself, the Organizational Game Revealed. Now, like most mentors, I don't agree with everything in Harvey Kuhlman's book, but I do agree with the PI model that he talks about in there. And PI stands for performance, image, and exposure, okay? You can't do anything without that baseline knowledge, okay? That's your performance. That's how you work every day. That's your meteorology knowledge base, everything that you've done, okay? But that's only 10%, he argues, of your total success. 30% is actually the image that people have of you. How people perceive you will determine how and if they even want to work with you. So if you're doing great stuff, but nobody wants to work with you, too bad. You're not going to go anywhere. And then finally, the biggest part is exposure. If nobody sees your work, who's it helping? Okay? By building your network out, you kind of can get exposure by finding your early adopters. And we're going to talk about this here. If you have an idea, you're going to have people in your network that you know would resonate with that idea. Those are the people you want to find first, and then together you bring that forward. An idea is always stronger if multiple people are coming and saying, hey, this is all a good idea, than just yourself. So you can use that network that you just built to find that exposure. And you also want to find a friendly alter ego in that network, somebody who you trust and know is going to give you constructive feedback so that you can bring that idea to them, and they may not agree with it, or they may think it's a terrible idea, and they're going to tell you why, but they're going to tell you in a constructive way. And then together you can kind of form that idea and make it better. So how do we get this idea to the next level? There's something that Simon Sinek talks of called the law of diffusion of innovation. And this is what businesses use all the time to launch products like the iPhone, things like that. So you have your innovators, and those are the people that are actually, creating the product and kind of moving it forward. But you have these early adopters, right? These are the people that are camping out, waiting for days on end for the release of the iPhone. And these are the ones that are that kind of show and sell the idea to everybody else. And so, the argument is that if you can get your early adopters on board, some of the early majority people, the people who say, yeah, I could go either way on an iPhone, but I'll certainly give it a try. Once you get to that point, you have enough momentum to get your idea over the hump. And then the late majority people will start to come on board, and they say, hey, I don't really care about an iPhone at all, but everybody else is doing it. This train's leaving the station and I want to be on it. So they start to join. And then you have your laggards, and these are people who, no matter what, they're never going to use the iPhone. And that's okay. One of the things that can power your own sense of vulnerability here is that you will never please everybody, and stop trying to, because you don't need everybody to be on board with everything you say to make progress. Okay, and if you think that your ideas aren't worthy just because some people don't believe in them, then you're never going to get anywhere. So you find that smallest viable audience, they call it. This is the audience. Talk radio. You have extreme liberal radio, extreme conservative radio, and when these people launch shows, they're only looking for 3 to 4% of the total listening audience to make that show profitable. So the lesson there is that you don't need to have a ton of people on board to make an idea really thrive. And finally, we're wrapping up here. This is adaptability, one of the biggest keys. And is there anything like 2020 to show us that we need to be adaptable in what we do? The most successful hitters in baseball learn to hit the curveball. Nothing in this world stays the same forever. And, the virus, the pandemic has shown us that over and over again. But if we can get ahead of the change that we see coming, that can yield the most successful results. So comfort tends to be a big detractor of this progress. Okay, we drag our feet because we're comfortable with how things are now, and we don't want them to change. However, if you know a change is coming and you can get ahead of that change, you can mold that change, you can be a part of that, you can be invested in that. And then your own very valid ideas become a part of that. So the best thing to do is try to get ahead of that change, because you can either see that train coming, get ahead of it, or you can basically be run over by it, because a lot of this change is going to happen whether you like it or not. Okay, so you really want to push your boundaries. I talked about traveling before. There's no better way to do it than travel. Push your boundaries, get yourself out of your comfort zone in one way or another, and then you're absolutely going to be able to start to gain confidence that, hey, I can do something different. I survived, I'm okay, and maybe I'm a better person because of it. And so keep pushing your boundaries. But you're going to struggle, especially as you get into management positions, to, everybody isn't going to be on board. And so you do have to kind of help people along. So you want to create these safe zones to help people adapt to new situations. This happens all the time with new tech innovations, right? We've always done it this way. It's working. I don't want to do it. Okay. Well, if you introduce the topic and you say, here's something new, it might make your life easier. And by the way, if you use it and it doesn't work, then, well, maybe we're not stuck exactly here. We can modify it. Or, if a forecast goes off the rails because you use this product, that's okay too. We're going to have a learning curve here. And so you create this safe zone, and then people say, okay, I'm not going to get in trouble if I don't do my job as well with it right away. And it might make my life easier. Okay, I'll give it a try. And so we got to have to kind of to make the safe space for things to happen like that. And final thoughts, you got to give up some control to gain sanity, right? You cannot be in control of everything. And in fact, the vast majority of things are out of your control. No matter how much you work on everything that I've talked about here today, there are so many things in hiring that are out of your control. You feel disappointed because you didn't get the job that you were going for. Well, maybe in that situation, they were just looking for something different. Maybe they had other things that you're not seeing behind the scenes going on. Maybe there was a medical transfer that they had to take. But there are a lot of things that are out of your control. It doesn't mean that you're bad at what you do. It just means that this time wasn't the right time. But keep putting those little pieces in the bank, and you're eventually going to get to where you want to go. I'm very confident of that. So continue to cultivate your skills. The best things do take time to marinate a little bit, and dig deeper into these topics that speak to you, and find your own sources. Now, as a final story, I'll leave you with this. If you don't think personal relationships matter, in the early 2000s, I was working down at the Hurricane Research Division in Miami, Florida. I was working with Chris Lancey, who's now the branch chief at TAFB at the Hurricane Center. And there was another person there, an intern, a student that had come down from the summer from UNC Wilmington to work on the same project, basically. And so we met and we talked, and we got to know each other, and we kept in touch over the years. And then that person was a year ahead of me in the leadership development program that I've been talking about. And then, we kept in touch over the years, and 20 years later, that person is my boss here at the Weather Service in Morehead City. So David, Glenn, and I have had a good relationship going back many, many years that started very small, and kept in touch, and just a prime example of how personal human interaction matters. And with that, that's all I have. I'm always willing to talk about these topics. I'm very passionate about them. contact me at the email address there, ryan.ellis@noaa.gov, if you have anything you want to discuss, good or bad. And I'll leave you with this reading list from this picture here. We talk about travel. This was the first place that I went to when I stepped foot on the European continent outside of an airport. This is Trinity College Library in Dublin, in Ireland, and you can do a lot of great things there, like check into your genealogy, things like that. So I definitely recommend it either before or after you go to the Guinness storehouse and get your free Guinness. So enjoy these books. For those, if you look in the handout section on the GoToWebinar, you can get a PDF of this talk, and it's exactly kind of what I talked about here today, and that reading list is on there for you. So with that, I will open it up to any questions. Again, we went a little bit over here. If you've got places to go, I get it. If you want to stick around and chat, I am definitely willing to do that with you. All right, I've got a lot of stuff in the question box here. I'm gonna move these over. All right, so Lana can hear you. Okay. Robbie Monroe says, here's a good quote related to fear of failure. I don't ever lose. I either win or I learn, from Nelson Mandela. That is so true. I love that. Just a comment from Barry Goldsmith. Great point on SpaceX. Also, there were several delays leading up to the launch last week. I live nearby and attended one of those delays. After the hard landing, the first thing I thought was, wow, they landed right on the pad after reaching 8 kilometers. Yeah, absolutely. That was incredible to watch. The video is amazing. And if you think about SpaceX, just think about what they did a couple of weeks before that, sending the 4 astronauts up to the International Space Station. That was an incredible moment for me too. Here in Eastern North Carolina, we were able to see the rocket as it went up, and it separated from the first booster, and we were able to watch it go as it moved kind of north and east as it was making its way to orbit. Just an incredible moment to see, and something we don't definitely see every day. Not common, but very interesting and useful to me was the Enneagram, a quite older system of personality classification. I haven't heard of that one, so I'll definitely look that up. That's from John Crockett. Thanks for that. Francis says, DISC assessment is another popular personality type training tool. The NWS mentorship program uses that instead of Myers-Briggs. I definitely agree with that. I have taken the DISC assessment. I really like that one. I'm not going to go into it here because if you're going to do DISC assessment, the best way to do it is the first thing to do is go in and take the tests without learning about what it is and having any preconceived notions. And I think the results will speak to you even more. So great point there, Francis. This one's going to be asked anonymously. Given the emphasis on relationships you've discussed and the networking importance of in-person relationships, etc., many NWSers have found they like the telework and are pushing to continue post-pandemic and even exploring more operational telework. For example, doing the forecast or portions of it from home. How do you see this affecting relationships and the teamwork environment with high impact weather events if this continues or expands? I personally worry that our new forecasters might not see the same family, dysfunctional though it may be, environment that so many of us thrived in. Okay, that's a great point. And I will say, you know, we talked about getting out of our comfort zone, and the pandemic has done that on a huge scale, okay? And I was 3 months, 4 months into the Sioux job my first Sioux job when this hit. And all of a sudden, everything we did had to pivot online. And some bad things about it, of course, we're missing the face-to-face interaction that we get every day. I am a huge proponent of being in person, learning in person, everything. But there are things that we've taken away from this that also have been very positive for me. And one of them was just simply the introduction to Google Meet for everything that we basically do. People that were now only meeting, I'm talking now about myself as a Sioux doing regional calls, working with people in other offices across the country. These used to be done on just conference calls where we had voice and people sat in the background. This gave us an opportunity to actually see the faces of the people that we work with around the country. And so in some ways, this drives me crazy because I'm feeling more and more disconnected from my local office family in this pandemic, but I am feeling increasingly connected to those that are farther away from me all the time. And so that portion of it has gotten better, but the internal certainly suffers when we're not there every day. And as managers, just for safety, we're trying to stay out of operations as much as possible so that if something happens, we can rotate in there. So it's a mix. It's really a mix, but there's nothing like getting together in person. I think you'll find with AMS this year that they're going to do a great job hosting it virtually, but you're not going to get the same feeling as getting on a plane and going to another city and meeting with folks from all over the field to actually sit down and talk with people over a meal about some of these harder problems we face. And so it's a great point, and I think there's opportunity for both, but we can't forget, remember the mime, in person is better. Don't be the mime, okay? Nice comment from Peyton, thank you. Another nice comment from Jesse. Thank you, Jesse. Jamie Betcher, great person that a lot of us know in the weather service. She's the radar girl. Many thanks for a wonderful talk about what matters most, relationships. And that's coming from somebody who knows a whole lot about a very technical system. Nice comment from David. Okay, here's a question. What has helped you personally deal with imposter syndrome? Okay, I didn't go into this too much, but imposter syndrome is you feel like you either can't do the job that you have already gotten or that you're not worthy of it. And so for me, being a fairly new Sioux, there's a lot of this imposter syndrome of, what am I really doing in this job? Am I really the right person for this job? How is my staff looking at me? Do they think I'm doing a good job here, or do they think I'm a joke? This is the imposter syndrome that rears its ugly head along, with a lot of stuff that you do. And it can feel this way in personal relationships too. Does this person really like me? Am I worthy of this other person? For me, I think the biggest thing that's helped is having mentors that I really respected and looked up to, telling me that they felt exactly the same way. I think that this is part of the underlying human fabric, that we all feel these things to some degree or another, and just some of us admit it and some of us don't. But really hearing from people that you know and respect, that you consider, successful in the field and have done a lot of stuff, saying the same thing, that can really help. And so, I'd encourage you to, talk about that with trusted mentors that you kind of look up to. And the other thing I'd add to that, though, is kind of what we talked about in the fear of failure and not being able to get off the fence, is that, again, you're your biggest critic. People, are not thinking about you as much as you are thinking about you. It sounds selfish, but it's true. So, just know in mind that you're your own worst critic, and that, if you continue to make the improvements to yourself, I think you can self-ease a lot of that imposter syndrome if you kind of relax and learn that you're not going to be in control of everything. You're not going to get it right all the time. You are going to fail at certain points. It's how you deal with it after that point that matters. Great comment there. Question, Julie. Excellent comment from Mark. Suggest presenting at the student conference at the annual meeting. Thanks for bringing up the point of students, because this is something that I've really tried to bring into my career at all points. It was easy in Raleigh because we were co-located with NC State, and prior to that, I was on a college campus for 20 years. But these are things that, like the title suggests, they don't teach you as well as they do the derivation of the equation. And so it's important, I think, the earlier you can learn these things and work on them, the more dividends it pays over time. So think again to the financial reference. If you start saving for retirement at 30 or 40, you're going to be worse off in the end than if you start saving for retirement at 20 years old. So the same thing goes true here. If you can invest in these skills at 20 years old, as soon as you get out into the workforce, you're going to have a huge advantage over people, not only in the jobs that you're going to get, but actually being hired into those jobs. And having those intangibles, those things that are hard to teach, is a huge thing. So students, get on board with this and get on board early. Question from Keith. From your personal experience, do you have any tips, aside from those shown here, for focusing on the present versus moving goalposts? Keith, this is one that I've struggled with so much, because how much of my career did I spend trying to just be a Sioux, when I look back on that now and I'm like, those years of being a forecaster were everything I dreamed of. I remember coming into the weather service my first day of my first job in Raleigh, and just being blown away in awe and just loving every single minute of it. And then, quickly over time, we start to lose that, that newness. So I've tried to work a lot on things like meditation and being more in the moment. Certainly living in Hawaii for a period of time taught me this. You do what matters in the moment. If the surf is up, you go surfing until the surf goes down. Then you go back to work. So I would say that take time out to take stock in. And some people can do this through a journal, but you don't have to. It can be in your own head. Take stock in the positive things that you're thankful for in your life, and recognize the good in those things, and revel in the good of those things. Experience that, let yourself feel that reward. And then what happens is you're almost giving yourself that shot of dopamine, so that when, the more you do that, just naturally, the more you kind of stay in the moment. So, that's something that, we could go on for hours about. But a book that helped me with that was Jon Kabat-Zinn's, and I don't think it's on this list, but it's Wherever You Go, There You Are. And it's a great book about just being in the present. More good comments. All right, another ex-student of mine, Adam. Love your talk. The concepts discussed are very important to get across to current and future workers. Just curious, are some or all of these topics covered during the leadership development course hosted within NOAA NWS? As a student looking to jump into a career with the NWS relatively soon, I would like to know more about leadership opportunities within my future workplace. And I'll say that, you know, getting into the weather service, I learned early on, Adam, that we have some of the best on the job training that you can get. Some of these skills you're going to pick up just in experience on the floor, and a vast majority of them. And you're going to have an opportunity every day to work on these skills. And so that's my first point, is you don't have to have a specific leadership program to do this and to cover this. My other point would be that, yes, there are plenty of leadership opportunities and they're growing every day. We've got the NWS mentorship program. There's a NOAA mentorship program. Each region, as far as I know, has a leadership program that you can get into that covers a lot of this stuff. But remember what I said in the beginning, each of these has dissertations and textbooks written. So even the leadership programs, they're much more in depth. You participate in them over a span of years, and they still can't cover everything that you know is out there. And that's kind of like the perfect forecast idea. You're never going to get exactly perfect in exactly what you need to know. There's never going to be this checklist of do this, 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 and all of a sudden you'll be a leader. These are skills that you have to practice and hone over time. And then I would encourage you to not only take advantage of all those opportunities within the weather service, but also from the outside. Remember, the weather service is our own frame of reference as an organization. There are plenty of organizations on the outside that are doing things in different ways than we are. And so I'd encourage you to look for some of these leadership podcasts. I've got a ton of them, so just, you know, email me and we can hook you up. But, you know, look for those things that make people successful and what they did to get there, whether that's in the tech field, whether that's in the medical field. There's a lot of that going around right now. And find those opportunities to learn from those outside the agency as well. Thanks. Yeah, so Bob has a great point here. Often a challenge to go from focusing on yourself through school to focusing on others once you, quote, grow up. Totally get that, Bob. And even in the early career stages especially, right, we're so focused on the goal of what we want to be within the agency that a lot of that stuff, just the way the hiring process is, kind of puts you into a mindset to have to do that, right? We apply for a job and there's all these things on there, all these qualifications we have to have. And so you have to do this, you have to do that, you have to learn about this, you have to hone your skills in this area. And so a lot of this is self-focused and personal, individual improvement, because if we can't do those baseline things, then we're not gonna get, you know, onto the other stuff. But there comes a point in the career when you start to realize, okay, I've got the necessary stuff. I feel pretty good about where I am as a meteorologist. Now, what do I need to do going forward? And you start to learn that, you know, going into some of the management jobs where you're not dealing with just yourself anymore. Even a program leader in an office, you have to deal with the other forecasters and lead a program. Well, not only is that program going to improve your status because you're a leader of it, but you better be able to, you know, elevate your teammates around you so that what you're doing has meaning not only for you, but for them. And soon that balance starts to shift, where your greatest success is going to come from elevating everybody around you. And it's not about you. And I truly believe that with my current job. You know, this is the point where this talk is me trying to give back what I've learned to a number of people. Let's see, Caitlin here. Wanted to ask for some advice for myself and other students who are graduating this upcoming May in looking for jobs. I feel as though I struggle with imposter syndrome, even though I've gained knowledge in this field with internships and projects. But I feel as though I won't ever get a job, especially during the pandemic. Is there any advice you would give upcoming graduates, especially during the pandemic? Okay, I've come across this a couple times. There are things that pop up that seem larger than life itself. Nothing bigger than the pandemic, right? The world basically came to a screeching halt. And I remember my dad saying to me, you know, this is as close to the end of the world as I think I'm ever going to see in my lifetime. And, you know, he had a point there. But at the end of the day, this is something that, looking back on history, that I truly believe is going to be temporary in nature. And so these are things that get in the way, that make us think that we can't do something. And my encouragement to you is just keep going, because the pandemic, and I've learned this especially, is something you definitely can't control. Okay, I can control my own personal space. I know when I go to the store, I'm gonna put a mask on. Okay, but looking around, man, I can tell you that I can't control everybody else to make those same decisions. And so those are the things that are going to come along in various forms, not just the pandemic, that you can't control. What you can control is your own individual sphere of influence. So, you know, working hard, you've already said you've gained the knowledge, the jobs are going to come, okay, especially in government right now. You know, the jobs are going to come. For students that are out there that don't know, the agency and the Weather Service in particular is facing a kind of a bimodal distribution of age groups, where we have a lot of people that are about to walk out the door and retire. All those people are going to need to be replaced at some point. And so all of those opportunities are going to come for you. The other age group, it seems like, has just walked in the door. So there's this gap between those that have all the experience, right, of being a forecaster for 30 years. And so I'm trying to harness that right now. Please share with me everything that you got before you leave, because I've got, you know, younger folks coming in that are going to benefit from that experience. And so, you know, just keep going is what I would say. And like I said, put little things each day in the bank. You've done the internships and the projects. Be confident in yourself, and the opportunities are gonna open for you. You know, maybe not the exact opportunity you wanted, maybe not the time you wanted at first, but those opportunities will be there. And as you continue to go down the road, you're gonna gradually get to exactly where it is you are meant to be and you want to be. And another good comment from Keith there. So thanks, Keith, for that. I am out of questions. All right, so that was a great discussion. I thank everybody for the questions. I still got 49 people here hanging on. That's awesome. So, you know, we went over with the discussion, but my intention was to get you the most I could in about an hour, and then hopefully, you know, if these things resonate with you, follow up with me later for a one-on-one conversation, and we can dive deeper into whatever it is you really want to talk about. So please do that. This is being recorded. I'm going to go ahead and get that recording out to folks. Feel free to share that with as many people as you want. And we're going to have that on the AMS BOGM YouTube page. So if you hadn't, find us on Twitter, find us on Facebook at AMS BOGM, and on YouTube as well, and check back for that. We'll have it on those sites as well. Thanks to everybody on the board here. This is kind of my last duty as AMS chair, AMS BOGM chair. So as I pass off the reins to Dr. Stefan Bida and all those that have shared this time on the board with me, I'm incredibly thankful for it. I'm really excited about what we've done over the past 3 years. I think we've moved the board forward and put it in, you know, a decent place where you're going to be able to take it from here and do even more incredible things with it. So thank you so much to my board members and everyone else who took the time out today